Senator Dan Sullivan represents the great state of Alaska, where he serves on Armed Services and Commerce. Welcome, Senator. Thank you for joining us. Where's the line in your judgment between deference and acquiescence? Some of your colleagues promise a fair confirmation process, even a deferential one, while others have indicated they'll vote yes on all nominees, period. So where's the line to you?
Well, Trey, first greetings from big, snowy, beautiful Alaska, and happy Thanksgiving to you and all the viewers.
Thank you.
Look, my view on this is the U.S. Senate has a constitutional role to play, certainly, and it's also a testament to our founders. The advice and consent process has really served America very well for over 200 years. At the same time, I'm a strong believer in the fact that the president should get, in general, the cabinet that he wants, particularly in an election like we just saw with President Trump, that was overwhelmingly in favor of his agenda that he laid out. So it's the balance between making sure the president gets the cabinet he wants. He picks the cabinet. We have our advice and consent process. We go through that, but also to make sure that we're getting highly qualified cabinet officials. And I think in the case of who President Trump has put forward thus far, I think it's looking very strong in that regard.
You put your finger on the seminal phrase, which is fabulously vague, advice and consent. One thinks of advice beforehand, as in asking, should I do this? The president-elect is under no obligation to call senators ahead of time, but sometimes they do to kind of gauge reaction to nominees. Is there ongoing dialogue between the president-elect and the Senate?
Oh, I think so. And look, I mean, the Senate gives its advice and consent. As you mentioned, consent is the actual vote, but advice is just that. And when nominees come before committees, there's a lot of advice in terms of hearings, but also the meetings beforehand. I think a lot of senators weigh in with the president and his team. Hey, this could be a good candidate, not just for cabinet officials, but for deputy secretaries, undersecretaries. So there's a lot of back and forth. And I think that's actually really healthy. As I mentioned, I think the process itself has really helped our country over 200 years. It really, in my view, shows the brilliance of our founders.
Yeah, I know the military is near and dear to your heart, Senator. Let's listen to General Milley, and then I want to ask you a question on the other side.
Bottom line is, breathe deep. America's going to be okay. If all you're going to do is come in with a wrecking ball and just blow things apart, then what you're going to get is rubble. And if that's what you want, that's awesome if you want rubble. But that's not going to defend the United States. So we absolutely have to transform the Pentagon. But it has to be done correctly.
When it comes to the military, what is the difference between disruption and reform versus destruction? Or, as the general said, getting rubble rather than reform? What's the key to you?
Well, look, I think the Pentagon is in dire need of reform, serious reform, particularly after the 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration. And, in my discussions with Pete Hegseth, one of the things that I really like, and by the way, it's this national security team, not just Pete Hegseth, but Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor. This is a strong trio that the president has put forward. But here's the key thing from my perspective, Trey. We need to get back to the core mission of the Department of Defense. That's lethality, that's winning wars, that's peace through strength. I just retired this year from the Marine Corps. I'd been in for 30 years. So I saw firsthand some of the woke stuff that was happening with regard to the Biden administration. You had a Secretary of the Navy who was more focused on climate change and shipbuilding. One of President Biden's first executive orders, just 1 or 2 days after his inauguration, wasn't focused on lethality, winning wars. It was focused on transgender surgery for active duty troops. So look, we need to get back to the mission of the Pentagon, which is to win our nation's wars and to create the most lethal force in the world to deter wars. And I think Pete Hegseth is very focused on that. And that is a refreshing change, a critical change that the American people want and we need in the Department of Defense.
Thank you for joining us on a Sunday night, and happy Thanksgiving to everybody in the great state of Alaska.